everyone, I am Zazubaar, and today I am here with you people of YouTube for a celebration. Yes, a celebration of one of my own lifelong personal conquests. If I were to be part of a Moby Dick, Captain Ahab analogy, I think that maybe one of the best things to put as my white whale to my Captain Ahab would be a very particular video game that came out when I was just a wee lad, when I was a child in the mid-2000s, early to mid-2000s. I played a video game that came out for the PlayStation 2 that, for the life of me, I could never beat. I would always try, but I would always inevitably fail to beat the game. I would try over and over again, but just would lose interest after seeing the same goddamn frustrating death animation over and over and over again. So I would give up and move on to something else. Now, I picked up this very same game years later, and one console generation later, in about when I was in 10th grade, wherever that year leads me. So I picked this game up again. I bought it with my own hard-earned coin of like, I don't know, $9. And I went home, I dug my PlayStation 2 out of storage, popped this fucker in, and got a lot further this time, but still couldn't beat the game. So, well, I could have beaten it, but again, I tend to lose interest in things really quickly, and, you know, again, you just see the same goddamn death animation over and over again. You just, like, it demoralizes you, it just shoots you down. It's like a major depressant. It's like the worst drug imaginable. You just take it over and over and over again. So you just give up. You just stop. And that's exactly what I kept doing with this video game. But, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in a long time, I dug that fucking game out of my messy-ass house. Same thing with my PlayStation 2. I hooked that fucker up. And for the first time in my 19 years of living on this planet, almost 20, Bill Worster, Zazubaar, to you very lovely folks out there on YouTube, have beaten this game. I speared my white whale in the face hard. The motherfucker's dead. And I fucking feel proud. It took a lot of hours of work and sacrifice, that sacrifice being my social life, as if I have one. But I fucking did it. I killed that white whale, and now I'm feasting on its flesh. And how am I feasting on this video game's flesh? Well, I'm gonna feast on it by reviewing that motherfucker. I am gonna sit down with you lovely folks who are not actually here in the room with me, but you'll hear it at some point, and I am going to review that video game, My White Whale. Although in this case, maybe calling it a green whale would be more apt. Because, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, today, I, Zazubaar, am here to review and celebrate with you the 2005 open-world video game based on the popular Marvel comic book series, The Incredible Hulk: Ultimate Destruction.
We've got a 1099 in progress. Suspect is approximately 12 feet tall, green skin. All units move in. Perp is unarmed.
The world is your weapon, rage is your ammunition, and the target is whatever you want to destroy. Quite possibly the best superhero game to date. The Incredible Hulk: Ultimate Destruction. Rated T for teen.
So yes, today we are going to take a very long and detailed look at the 2005 video game Hulk: Ultimate Destruction, which was one of my favorite games from childhood, and a game you see pop up on a lot of people's like top 10, comic book video game lists, which is really not that surprising since there aren't a lot of good ones, but it always makes the list along stuff like Batman: Arkham Asylum, Ultimate Spider-Man, all these different X-Men Origins Wolverine, all these different comic book video games that, which is a weird phrase, that have kind of elevated themselves beyond just being the mediocre, cliched crap that's just ripping off other video games that so many licensed video games are. Now, Hulk: Ultimate Destruction is interesting because usually when you look at these lists, it's one of the first ones in terms of when it came out to be on there. Again, usually you see stuff like Batman Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, the whole Arkham series. You get to see Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2. Trying to think of another good DC property. Really, DC hasn't done much as outside of Batman that's tolerable. I mean, must I even mention Superman 64 or that horrible Aquaman game that we talked about on Geeky Gentleman once. But regardless, you see Hulk Ultimate Destruction on those lists a lot. Now, again, it's one of the first, and Hulk Ultimate Destruction is interesting because of why it was made. Now, if I get my history correctly, and if anybody listening, listens to me say this and is like, that's fucking wrong, you're an idiot, I apologize, and you're more than welcome to correct me in the comments. But based on the way the making of featurette on the game disc plays out, and what I know of Hulk history, I think this is why Hulk Ultimate Destruction was made. Basically, the company that made the video game based on a 2003 Hulk movie, which was not a travesty, but not great, they had the Hulk license and decided to do another Hulk game not connected to the movie that they would be able to just run wild with. Take all their material right from the comics, right from all Hulk lore, and not be bound by any kind of previously established movie that they would have to be somewhat faithful to. Which is something they talk about on the disc. They talk about how they didn't want Hulk Ultimate Destruction to be limited by anything except what they could bring to life in the game, and what the comic books had to offer, and what they didn't want any limits. And that's what Hulk Ultimate Destruction is all about. It's all about relinquishing limits from the player and from the game itself. And it works beautifully. I mean, again, why I think it pops up on all these game lists is because it's disgustingly original. Which sounds weird, but it's definitely fitting. You have this group of people who are like, we really like this character, and we want to do him justice, and give players what they want out of a Hulk game. And that's what this title promises, and what the game itself delivers on. Ultimate Destruction. Hulk is one of the most powerful characters in all of comics, potentially the most powerful in the Marvel Universe, given his line, Hulk is the strongest one there is, which he has in this game, which is cool fan service. And to be able to control that incredible ball of energy and rage and just tear through a game environment should be one of the most satisfying and fun experiences you have in a video game. And that's what Hulk Ultimate Destruction promises and again delivers on. The previous Hulk game that was based on the movie, yeah, Hulk was strong, but he couldn't really do much outside of what a character like Kratos in God of War could do. Now, I think God of War came out after that game, but that's all I can think of for comparison. So that's what was really disappointing about that game, was you didn't feel like you really were the Hulk, especially the Hulk of the comics. The Hulk of the comics is insanely powerful, and he's able to do stuff in the comics that we haven't even seen attempted on the big screen. His healing factor, his ability to jump incredible distances. The 2003 movie touched on his leaping abilities, but the Avengers and the 2008 movie kind of held back on it. They held back on those leaping abilities, I think, because I think the idea of the Hulk leaping is better in the comics and better in theory than it is looking on a movie screen. Like, you look at 03 and there are some moments where you're like, he looks like a fucking bouncy ball. That being said, it's a cool power to have, and it's a really unique way to get around a game environment. And the leaping is one thing, and the other thing is the Hulk is able to turn the environment into a weapon, into anything he can craft with his own hands, and anything that would just be fun to use. Because again, the Hulk, especially in this game and the way they characterize the Hulk and Bruce Banner, the Hulk is, what if we gave a 5-year-old incredible unlimited strength, power, indestructibility, and rage. The Hulk is childhood rage embodied. Everything, every rage, a child wailing is basically what the Hulk embodies. This angry child outcrying for love, but all it can do is destroy, because that's all it knows how to do, and it's the only thing it does that gets a response out of people. And that's the theme building under the Hulk in this game. And that's the aspect of Bruce Banner that the Hulk embodies. And for the most part, that's what the Hulk is in every version. Again, it depends on your continuity, especially in the comics now. Well, I haven't read all of Indestructible Hulk, but I think that's what they're going for. So they've kind of gone back to it, but recently with the Jason Aaron run and all the stuff before that, the Hulk was fairly intelligent and could solve his own problems even separated from Bruce Banner. And particularly, the writer of this game, Peter Jenkins, I believe is his name. I'm going to say Peter Jenkins, who is a Hulk writer. So it's, and that's another thing that this game was original for. It said, you know, fuck all these people who don't know the character but are popular in this medium. And by medium, I mean video games or before this film. Let's just get the people who know this character and you know, they'll get people who like this character excited. So they got a Hulk writer who wrote Hulk in the 90s, following the consequences of Peter David's run with all the different multiple Hulk stuff and the you know, making the Hulk more of a metaphor for Bruce's psyche. And that's what Peter Jenkins brings to this video game. And the whole game is very much so about what gamma radiation does to a person's psyche, what it brings out, and the deterioration of a person's body being parallel with the deterioration of somebody's mind, with the gamma rays connecting the two, with somebody's psyche leading to what their deterioration of their body turns into, which is parallel with you know, the Hulk and Blonsky and the Abomination and the Devil Hulk. But we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to say that this game was so insanely original and fresh when it first came out, and players had never really had a taste of what it was like to just be able to jump into an environment and play as a character who could rip that environment apart. I think the closest thing we had to this before this was the Spider-Man video game. Spider-Man, well, we had Spider-Man 2 at this point too, but both Spider-Man video games, you had full reign to swing around New York and just be flexible and save people and swing around and be flexible and acrobatic, which is fun, but for players, you still didn't have the ability to do whatever you want in that universe. And maybe it says something about Hulk fans, but Hulk fans want to jump into an environment and be able to destroy it. That's just what we want out of a video game where we get to play as a character that powerful. And that's what Ultimate Destruction grants you. You get to go into a city, pick up a car, rip it apart, turn them into steel gloves, and then beat the fucking shit out of another mutant. Which is insanely satisfying. And you can scale buildings, you can tear buildings down, not to the extent that I would like. This is actually one of my minor complaints with Hulk Ultimate Destruction, since it does guarantee you ultimate destruction, but you can't, for the most part, you can destroy anything in the environment, except for skyscrapers, which is one of the things you want to do as a Godzilla fan. And even as a Hulk fan, one thing you want to be able to do is walk up to a skyscraper and just knock it down, which Hulk is more than capable of doing. If the Hulk can take down a 100-foot mech with his bare hands, he should be able to have no problem taking down a building. Now, the reason why Hulk Ultimate Destruction, what they do is they have certain buildings in the environment that you can take down, and you have to find them. There's no way you know which ones you can take down until you start beating the shit out of them. And knocking a building down is insanely satisfying. Just to punch it, and then finally it starts to crumble. And you just get to see it crumble, and usually there's a nice little goodie rewarding you for your patience knocking down the building. It's insanely satisfying. The problem is that it takes so long to find one you can knock down that you get frustrated and just move on to something else. And I think that, that's one of the few things that the 2008 Hulk video game, the one based on the Incredible Hulk, built on. That video game is very much so inspired by Hulk Ultimate Destruction, and it's not terrible, but it's a cheap version of Hulk Ultimate Destruction. It has none of the charm. You know, the graphics are shit, even though they're on a next-generation console, and playing as the Hulk just isn't as satisfying in that game, because you're bound by a very particular plot, and it's just not as satisfying as this game is. And I think, again, part of that is because some of the originality of Hulk Ultimate Destruction was sucked out because it was a knockoff of that. And just all the charm is gone out of that game. So that's one of my... But the plus is that you can knock down any building you want in that game. All buildings can be destroyed. The only thing that really bounds you is that knocking down a building is like the highest offense you can commit, and the military will be on your ass. So, you know, once you knock down a building, it's very quickly like, okay, fuck you, Hulk, we're shooting missiles at you now. So that was one of the things that kept you bound. Because I think the reason why in Ultimate Destruction they're like, okay, there are very specific buildings you can knock down, is because that means more programming. You have to program every single structure in the world to be able, like the Hulk will be able to destroy it, which takes a lot of time. And when you think about it on a designer level, it's kind of unnecessary because it's like, this is such a minor thing, and it's almost like a backup plan. Like, oh, God forbid the players think, hey, I think I can destroy everything, so they start punching a building. It's a what if scenario, as opposed to focusing on more important things like developing the story and, creating other fun things that the Hulk can do. That's the other thing that makes this game so much fun, is that the Hulk can almost do anything. You get from the get-go, you start getting these things called smash points, which are these little green and yellow orbs you collect from beating enemies and tearing apart structures. Which it's good that... What's also really good about this game is that everything is tailor-made for the Hulk, for the most part. Everything that you can do in the game that you do in the game is designed knowing that you're playing as the Hulk. So the entire game is built around destroying stuff and rewarding you for creatively, efficiently, and just fucking badassly destroy, if that's a word. If it's not, I just fucking made it up. Destroying stuff and beating enemies and just being angry. It just wants to, the Hulk Ultimate Destruction just asks you to unleash your inner rage, your inner Hulk. Because I think that's the big thing here. One of the things that makes this game so insanely satisfying is that it's just fun, and everybody, no matter what you say or don't admit, has at some point in their life wanted to transform into the Hulk. Because just imagine how satisfying that would be. Because you're not thinking about the consequences of it when you do it. All that matters is that you're pissed off, you want to tear something apart, and just imagine how satisfying it would be to get into a fight with your parents, or get cheated on by a girlfriend, or, your car runs out of gas, whatever, some kind of stressful situation that makes you angry. Imagine how satisfying it would be to just unleash all of that rage and turn into a giant green monster and just tear shit apart. Again, maybe that says something about you don't like, but it's inside everybody. And I think that that's one of the things that makes the Hulk so interesting as a character, and just such a genius concept to do as a video game. Because again, video games are the ultimate fantasy. You get to become whatever character you want, and go in and do everything that character can do. It is the penultimate fantasy. You get to escape to that world and play around in that world for a while, and forget about real life. And again, doing that with the Hulk just makes so much goddamn sense. To go in, tear shit apart, nobody can, well, people can stop you, but with the facade that nobody can stop you, and that anything is possible as this giant green rage monster, to quote Tony Stark from the Avengers. So, it just makes so much sense to do it as a video game. I think that's one of the things that makes Hulk Ultimate Destruction so good, is that you just get to do that. It's such a simple idea, but executed so well that you can't help but admire it. And isn't that just the bane of all genius? This just taking the simplest idea and doing it well, and excelling at it. That's what genius is. So I think that by that definition, Hulk Ultimate Destruction is genius. So aside from the bare basic fantasy of going into a city and decimating it as the Hulk, what else makes this game stand out? What else makes it so insanely good? Well, I think the voice cast helps out a lot. The story is really strong, but it's early on in games telling stories. It's that early period of, PlayStation 2 and Xbox One, Xbox One is impossible to say now, the original Xbox era games that were building up to be able to tell complex stories that enhanced the gameplay, where the story was well told and the gameplay was good as well. Usually you kind of had either one where, oh, the story is really contrived just to get the gameplay to happen, or the gameplay suffers because the story is so complex that it's just not as much fun. That was definitely a big hurdle that game designers were trying to get over in those early years. You can debatably say we've gotten over it now, but there are still a lot of examples of, I don't want to listen to all this heavy material, just let me shoot something, or, oh my god, this story is so interesting, but the gameplay sucks. I think there was a recent game that had that problem. I don't remember the name. I think it had, forget it. But there was a game I heard about recently where that was a factor, where the story was really good, but the gameplay was fucking horrible. So, it doesn't happen as much nowadays, though. This game is almost 10 years old, so I would hope not. But again, the story, what makes it so interesting and so unique is that, again, it takes all of its materials right from the comics, which hadn't really been done before this in video games. Sure, you had stuff that was based on cartoons that were more, like there were a couple Batman TAS video games that were a little bit more like taking stuff from other Batman stories or doing their own original stuff, but even then, they're bound by a certain universe. This game creates its own universe out of the previously existing comic book universe. And what's also really original about Hulk Ultimate Destruction is that it takes that original comic book universe, and because it's taking from that, because fans of that are more often going to be adults, they make it for a late teen, early adult, or adulthood in general crowd. Which is probably another reason why I didn't beat it when I was a kid, because it wasn't really made for me. Yes, I was a fan of Hulk comics, so I knew the lore, but the gameplay is more designed for the patience of, like, say, a 16 to 35-year-old, which was a gaming crowd that was just becoming a major demographic in that time. So it makes sense that as how old was I? 11? I think I was 11 when this game came out. That an 11-year-old would get frustrated because of how often I was dying. And I also think I was disillusioned with the idea of I'm playing as this indestructible monster, but I can be killed so easily. Free playing the game, that still was a factor in some parts, because one of the other things is that this game, it gets insanely hard near the end. And it should. Games should rise in difficulty, but I think this game might go a little far. And the biggest problem with that is that the military in this game is fucking relentless. As you would expect from a Hulk game, your villain, your antagonist is the U.S. military because you're playing as a monster and a man on the run from the military trying to cure his affliction. Which is oftentimes the bane of most Hulk stories, the TV series, the animated series. Most Hulk properties take that tact, and even the most recent 2008 movie. And the Avengers, at least in the beginning. Now, because of that, the military is on your ass. Whenever you do anything as the Hulk, the military is almost always there to try and stop you. Meaning that it's a little bit hard to do whatever you want, so to speak, because every time you try and do something with the Hulk, it's like, we gotta fucking take that thing down, and start shooting at you and launching Hulkbusters at you. It's very, very frustrating, and it's fine, it makes sense, and I'm glad that there's always a supply of enemies to show off how strong the Hulk is, so you're not always just beating up on innocent civilians. But even still, especially near the end where you're trying to fight the main bosses, there's only one example where you don't have this. The military is always shooting at you, so it's instantly going to take away a lot of health while you're also trying to fight the other giant monster. It's very, very frustrating. So you're going to die a lot, and die a lot not knowing what killed you, because there's no way the enemy did it because he's halfway across the map, and you're standing here trying to recuperate, and there's fucking missiles flying at you. It can be helpful, especially in the last Abomination fight, because the Abomination is a lot stronger than you are. So it helps to be able to have somebody who's taking health off him while you're trying to get health yourself. But it's also a problem because they're shooting at you too, because they're fucking dumb military, and in cliche dumb military terms, they just keep shooting at you, not knowing what exactly is going on. Even in the 2008 movie, they were like, hey, Hulk's trying to help us, shoot at the other thing. In this game, they're like, nope, everything's bad, shoot that fucker down. If you're in the military and listening, no offense, I'm more criticizing the characterization of military in fiction. So they do this. I assume the real military would be like, hey, that giant green thing, I think it's trying to save that person, so stop shooting at it, because that's common sense. So anyway, to get off that point, again, back to the story. It kind of, again, it's early on for this kind of thing, so it's a little bit prototypey. And what I mean by that is how it tells its story. So here's the basic plot. Bruce Banner is trying to find a cure for the Hulk, as always. He thinks he has something, but is interrupted in the middle of the procedure by the military, who blows up his cabin, and he turns into the Hulk and freaks out and runs away after fighting the military. There's a new thing thrown in with a new director of the Hulkbuster, or division as it's called in this continuity, side of the military trying to take down the Hulk and Bruce Banner, named Emil Blonsky, who of course is one of the major villains in Hulk lore. Emil Blonsky is obsessed with Banner and has a personal hatred and stake in learning about gamma mutation specifically. We don't know why, except that this is all for the purpose of something called Mission Directive, and then he's obsessed with learning more about Bruce's science work about the Hulk and how to cure it mainly, which again parallels him and Bruce. But they seem to want it for different reasons. Bruce is trying to do it to help himself and the populace around him because, turning into the Hulk is a bad thing. While Emil Blonsky wants to get it because he wants to get rid of gamma mutation because he sees it as disgusting, as an aberration to nature. And in this version, just like in the comics, Emil Blonsky is obsessed with God and these creatures going against God. But we don't know why he hates gamma mutation so much until the end, which it's a great ending. And Emil Blonsky, this is probably my favorite version of Emil Blonsky. I like him even better than the comics because in the comics, Emil Blonsky becomes the Abomination very quickly, and we don't get to spend a lot of time with the man who becomes the monster like we do with Bruce Banner, because once Emil Blonsky in the comics becomes the Abomination, he stays that way. In this version, the same thing happens, but they do it differently. In this version, he becomes the Abomination in the first scene he's in, or at least he gets exposed to gamma rays and slowly becomes the Abomination. But the full transformation doesn't happen till the end, so we get to spend a lot of time with the man before he becomes the monster, and Emil Blonsky is made very complex and interesting in that time. Here's one of the things about the story. There aren't a ton of cutscenes, and the cutscenes that are here are usually pretty short, and just there to get major points of the story to happen. Major kind of game-changer events. Mainly main characters dying, villains dying, the first Hulk out, the major moments of Emil Blonsky becoming the Abomination, and also the main moments of Bruce Banner turning into the Devil Hulk. So it's a little bit... So the cutscenes don't get much of the universe building out of the way. That's more of what the Blonsky files are for. Now, what the Blonsky files are, it's not a spin-off of the X-Files. That was a bad joke. What the Blonsky files are is it's this separate part of the game in the main menu that you go to, and there's all these different decrypted files from Emil Blonsky that kind of flesh out the world, Emil Blonsky's character, and, just all the stuff that's happening. With the military trying to kill the Hulk, Blonsky trying to understand gamma mutation, this thing called the Vault, which is apparently a prison for gamma mutated subjects, and again, Mission Directive, which seems to be driving all of Blonsky's actions. Now, while the Blonsky files are interesting and it's fun to hear Banner and Samson's dialogue over it, Bruce Banner is wonderfully played in this game by Neil McDonough, who also voiced him in the animated series. And, for you Marvel buffs, he also played Dum Dum Dugan in the Captain America the First Avenger movie. And in that short that they did following the movie. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's going to be in a flashback in Winter Soldier. I'm not sure. But he plays that character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he also played Green Arrow in the Green Arrow short that was on that DC short films collection. I think Neil McDonough is a great actor, and he's fantastic as Bruce Banner. The problem is in the animated series is very, very focused on the Hulk, and Bruce Banner kind of gets shafted there. So to get to see him as Bruce Banner again in a more adult medium where he gets more characterization was really cool. Again, the problem is that this game is a lot... Because again, the problem is this. The Blonsky Files is where most of the story is told, as well as in the little mission objective screens where they tell you what exactly you have to do in the next mission. That's where most of the story is told. It's not done through cutscenes or dialogue exchanges. It's done in this voiceover sense, which it's been done before and after in the Call of Duty series, and it's an effective way to get important information about the plot out there. The problem is you don't really get to hear these actors and these characters come to life. Like, you don't get to see them really flex their muscles as, again, actors playing these characters. You don't get to see these characters really become interesting. Neil McDonough makes Bruce Banner he makes Bruce Banner complex, which is something I always appreciate. He makes him likable, he makes him fun to watch as much as the Hulk because of his intellect and his... I always like a Bruce Banner who is very, very antisocial. And what I mean by that is he's not nerdy and quiet, he's bitter and sarcastic. I like that Bruce Banner because that's a lot more interesting than the geeky shut-in we got in the early comics. And that's what he brought to the animated series in the very brief segments where he got to flex his Bruce Banner muscles, and that's what we get here, again, in the brief sections where Bruce Banner really comes to life. He gets 2 good scenes with Emil Blonsky, and he gets a bunch with Len Sampson, and we get to really see Bruce Banner be interesting outside of being the guy who turns into the Hulk, which is a lot of the times the problem. The only reason we put up with Bruce Banner's whining is because we get to see him turn into this fucking cool-ass monster. And, again, that's not... And when that's done, I don't like Bruce Banner, and I'd rather just see the Hulk be on screen. Or on panel, like in the Peter David series. And in the recent Hulk run before Indestructible Hulk. So that's always been annoying. Now, in this game, it's especially frustrating because they've created such a fascinating Hulk universe, and, you know, this game is very much so centered around the Hulk stuff, but I presume this exists in a wider superhero universe. We're not told, though there is a reference to the Daily Bugle. And based on the Hulkbuster's design and how it's always been done, I assume somewhere out there there's a Tony Stark who's Iron Man, but who knows? This game is very much so focused on the Hulk, as it should be. And, but again, the problem is that the world around it's so interesting, I wanted to spend more time getting to know it, and getting to see these characters deal with some of the really fucked up stuff that was going on, particularly Bruce Banner, because at one point in the game, spoilers, Len Sampson, the guy who's been helping him the whole time, and has been giving you all your missions, fucking betrays you. So, it's a major big point, and there is a scene dealing with it where Bruce Banner berates him for it, saying, "You should have trusted me," but it's still like this should be made a bigger deal. And Bruce Banner trusts him very quickly again, seemingly only because Len Sampson has an important piece of the machine he needs to cure the Hulk. But even still, I just wish that there was more time spent with Bruce Banner and spent on their relationship and just spent on the world in general. Now, I know it's a video game and that's not what's important, but because I liked it so much, I wanted to see more of it. And how I think it could have been fixed is if it was incorporated into the gameplay, like later on, Batman Arkham Asylum would be, where important story points were made present in the game. The problem with that here, and one of the inherent problems with doing a Hulk game, is that your protagonist is not really the character you're playing as. Now, I think this might have been solved if the Hulk would have more... If, A, the Hulk would have been more of a character as opposed to just a big gun like he is here. But more than that, if the Hulk would have expressed more of more desires that Banner also expressed. Like he does in most other Hulk stuff, where the Hulk seems to be this violent interpretation of what Banner wants. And that's talked about, that's what he is, but you don't see it in the gameplay. The Hulk in the gameplay is more of like, okay, we need muscle and power to do this one thing. Oh, you can turn into a monster. Do it. Now, they give a very clever story reason for why the Hulk is so subservient to Banner and Sampson in this game, with the Hulk, with this like machine they use, tapping into Banner's mind. And hypnotically suggesting to the Hulk what he should do. So basically, Samson will hypnotize Banner and implant these ideas in his head, which are mission objectives, like, okay, we need the Hulk to pick this up and bring it here. So we're going to implant that in your mind, and then when you turn into the Hulk will do it. Because the Hulk is essentially a child and very subservient to hypnotic suggestion. I also like that that's made clear before it's actually done. They have a Blonsky file talking about the Hulk where they say he's very subservient to hypnotic suggestion. Not meaning the Hulk is stupid, just that he's an emotional creature who acts on instinct. So the slightest bit of an idea he's going to act on. I really like that idea, and I think that's cool. And again, I'm glad that they gave a story reason for that, rather than just the Hulk randomly doing things the Hulk wouldn't do, like picking up a truck and bringing it back to a church and not destroying it. So stuff like that's really clever. But at the same time, you're also dealing with again, the problem of you're not playing as the protagonist of the story, so that leads to this disconnect between what's going on in the plot and what the Hulk is doing. What it oftentimes feels like is plot will happen, and then the Hulk will do something that's only tangentially connected, like, alright, we're building this machine that's going to let me tap into your mind and theoretically let me cure the Hulk. Though that gets changed halfway through, where the Hulk starts to change personality-wise. Bruce says early on, I feel like the Hulk's starting to break away from me. But it's actually not the Hulk that he's talking about. There's actually another aspect of Bruce Banner's psyche that's becoming more prevalent. And at a certain point, Bruce Banner is going to start to turn into that rather than the Hulk. And it's called the Devil Hulk, which is this giant monster that's hideous and looks nothing like the Hulk, and is the darker parts of Bruce's psyche. And this isn't said in the game, but as a Hulk fan, I know what it's supposed to be. If you know your Hulk lore, what the Devil Hulk is it's Bruce Banner's remembering his abusive father, Brian Banner. Brian Banner was an abusive father, an abusive husband, all around an asshole who took advantage of his children, of his kid, and hated him and told him he was worth nothing and that he was going to go nowhere in life, and Bruce Banner has to live with that throughout his entire life, and that's what the Hulk is. The Hulk is that scared child desperately looking for love, who is also constantly trying to defend himself, where Bruce Banner had all this built-up anger, and, turning into the Hulk is him letting it out, him being able to defend himself against his father. That's what the gamma rays brought out. The Devil Hulk is his father surviving inside Bruce's mind, constantly taunting him. But also, in this game, again, if you know that it's supposed to be Brian Banner, and if you listen to the Devil Hulk's dialogue, it's very clear that he's supposed to be a father figure to Bruce, or at least Bruce's father in general, calling him his prince, and, talking to Bruce as if he's talking to a child. And he's talking to the Hulk, so I guess that makes sense. And also when the Hulk starts to fight him, saying, "Why are you trying to betray me, Bruce?" which is a line I really like. What the Devil Hulk is, again, knowing Hulk lore like I do, and kind of inferring based on what we see of the Devil Hulk in this game, the Devil Hulk is supposed to be the evolution of the Hulk, as he calls himself. I'm evolution, and scientists aren't supposed to be afraid of evolution. I love that line. Also cool, paralleling that with Blonsky being a religious nut. I really like that. Sorry for the popping in the background. I'm having a drink. Anyway, so what they're inferring from this is that the Devil Hulk is Bruce Banner becoming his father. That Bruce Banner had his personality kind of split in two. One of them being the Hulk, which is the angry child defending himself, looking for love, and the Devil Hulk is Bruce turning into his father and turning into what he hated, and this happens in people. They'll be abused by their fathers, and then they in turn abuse their children just like their father abused them. To relate this back to a Hulk story, if you watch the TV series, the Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby TV series, there's an episode called Child in Need where David Banner helps out a kid who's being abused by his father. And what we learn about the abusive father is that the only reason he abuses his kid is because he was abused by his father. Same thing in this story, with Bruce Banner being abused by his dad and, becoming an abusive person because that's what was done to him, almost like a revenge thing. Oh, you did that to me, now I'm going to do it to you. That's what the Devil Hulk is. Problem is, that's a dark personality and evil and very, very dangerous. Because, again, the Hulk at the end of the day is still an innocent child. He's not going to hurt innocent people in theory. Though it's heavily implied that in this continuity, the Hulk isn't that controllable and has killed innocent people. But it's more often because of accidental blind rage as opposed to actual malice, which is what the Devil Hulk embodies. More than that, he's fucking hideous, so why would you want to... So again, ultimately this leads to the problem of the story is great in theory, it's not executed properly. It's just not told enough. Like, we don't get enough of the story. A lot of what I'm talking about is inferred based on what I know of Hulk lore and what's present in the game. And everything in there is fantastic. I just wish there was more of it, and I think that they could have gone a long way to creatively implanting the story into the game. And I think that it also could have gone a long way for my review if the Hulk, and again, this would be a tact of creativity, if Rare Studios would have found a way to incorporate Banner's struggle with the Hulk, and that's the best place that's done is in the scene where we're inside Bruce's head and the Hulk fights the Devil Hulk. That's probably the only example of it where that happens. I mean, his fight with the Abomination is very much so just, Bruce Banner is a good guy and the Abomination is a bad guy, and he's trying to stop him from doing an evil thing. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's what's there. The Devil Hulk fight is a lot more interesting, though the Abomination fight is a lot harder. I just wish that there would have been a more creative use of the Hulk in telling the story and bringing the characters to life. Again, as it stands, there's very much so a disconnect between what's going on with the story and what you're doing as the Hulk. And that just leads to kind of leads to the problem we talked about earlier of the story just kind of being there to set up the action of being the Hulk, or of what you're doing in the video game. Again, it's a little better than that, and the story itself is great, but we don't get enough of it. It's just not told enough of. It's not well told, I suppose is the way to put it. So that's really all I'm going to say about the story. Again, it's great for what it is. It's just not executed enough. Like, I don't think I've ever had this. The story isn't just well fleshed out enough. That's just the whole thing. It's just not. The game doesn't give itself enough time to tell its own story. So that's kind of the major thing I'm going to come down on. This review is getting really long, so I want to kind of start to wrap things up. What are the other major things I want to touch on? Again, gameplay-wise, my biggest problem, and I already said it earlier, was it's just a buttfuck of just a clusterfuck, rather, of a clusterfuck in the butt, if you will, of just constantly getting barraged with missiles and mechs and just enemies, and it's just like, how can one man take it on? Now, there are moments where you're getting clusterfucked by all these missiles and lasers and mechs and monsters, and you just destroy all of them, where you feel so insanely satisfied, and like you just unleashed all this rage. That's where the game is for, but it happens too often, and it becomes very frustrating when you're trying to do other things and focus on other things that are more interesting, like fighting another monster, where you just get tired of getting barraged with missiles and bullets and lasers and all this stuff. So I think that's my biggest problem with Hulk Ultimate Destruction. That being said, what else do I want to touch on? My other biggest problem is, this is an open world game, and like other open world games, there's got to be more to it than just the story, so they have these little side challenges that they're set. They're not side missions, they're not little mini stories that happen inside of the grander plot. No, they're just these little feats that the Hulk gets to pull off that look kind of cool. And they're fun little distractions, but, in an open world game, you want a little bit more than that. You want some more stuff to sprinkle into the world to make the world feel more fleshed out. Again, it's an early open world game, so I don't know how far they could have gone with that, but in a Hulk, and I'd love to see another Hulk game be made like this, but as it stands, the world feels kind of empty and kind of disconnected from the main story. Particularly the city, which is big, but nothing is in it. I mean, it's like, you see people in there, but, it's just like, they're not, there's a bunch of the same character models repeated, a bunch of cars go by, and yes, the military responds to your threat, but once the threat level is decreased, you just go back to doing what you were doing before. So, the city doesn't respond to you, and there's really no reason for you to respond to the city, because the city doesn't change. So that's kind of frustrating. Trying to think what else I want to say. One last thing I want to add. There's not, the ending of the game is fantastic. You beat the Abomination, and you save the day, and there's this really interesting idea of Bruce Banner has spent this whole game trying to cure the Hulk, but now realizes that he is the Hulk. That nobody is ever going to understand him, that he's never going to be able to get rid of it, so the only thing he can possibly do is own it. And use the Hulk to help people, which is what he just did. He used the Hulk as a positive. Now, it's interesting because the Bruce Banner just used... And again, this is where the game, being a video game, could have helped it a little bit. The idea of Bruce Banner used the Hulk to solve a major problem. And turned his curse into a blessing in order to save people and help himself. So I think he realized that, okay, I can use this curse to help people as opposed to just constantly running away from it, which is really, really interesting. And again, that's what's there, that's what's done with it. I wish the gameplay would have made that a little more clear and kind of explored that idea a little more. But that's what the ending's all about. Bruce Banner goes back to Doc Samson and says, because Doc Samson's like, "Oh, Bruce, I'm so sorry. We came this close to a cure. It was almost in our grasp." And Bruce says, "Most dreams are, Len, but we always lose them." Something like that. Something poetic like that. And Len goes, "Where are you going to go, Bruce? You've got nowhere left to run." And he just goes, "Nobody's ever going to understand." And it's this kind of pessimistic ending of nobody's ever going to understand me. The only thing I'm just going to do what I can and just be the Hulk and just, do what that, and just be what that entails. And I think this implies that Bruce Banner is going to try and use the Hulk as kind of a positive now, rather than just treating it like a monster. So that's kind of interesting, and that's where most Hulk stories tend to take Bruce Banner. It would have been nice to get a sequel game where this idea would have been more fleshed out, and we get to see where this universe goes with the Abomination being a bad guy and General Ross being left with the Vault and all these gamma mutations. It just would have been really interesting. Again, I love Emil Blonsky in this game. He's expertly voiced by Ron Perlman. The entire voice cast is fantastic. And Ron Perlman, just, oh my god, he's probably the best part about the game, is just his Emil Blonsky is so complicated and interesting, and he just plays it so well. He's no stranger to comic books and comic book franchises, so he plays it in a fantastic way. So I really love his Emil Blonsky, and he's just great. And the Abomination in this game is fantastic as well. Him and Tim Roth's version are kind of neck and neck for me, but I would even say Ron Perlman's kind of exceeds that because his Blonsky gets more characterization. And the religion thing is in the game, and it's not in the movie, and that's a major part of Emil Blonsky's character, so I like this Emil Blonsky better because that's there. Anyway, so I think that's all I have to say about Hulk Ultimate Destruction. It is a fantastic game. One of the most fun game experiences I've ever had. You just get to run around as the Hulk and tear shit apart, and it's the ultimate fantasy. You get to be the strongest creature on the planet and just unleash all of your rage. So if you're an angry person like me, pick it up and unleash your inner rage. It's probably going to be dirt cheap because the game is almost 10 years old, so what do you have to lose? It's a great Hulk story. It's great for Hulk fans. There's plenty of references. The Bruce Banner is fantastic, and you just get to be the Hulk. What else do you want? Anyway, so I think that's going to do it. I think that's going to be the end of my very long review of the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Thank you very much for watching, listening, whatever the fuck it is you did. As always, be sure to go ahead and like the Sons of Sarazawa Network homepage on Facebook. That's where my group, the Sons of Sarazawa, who I do podcasts with and other shows with, and that's just the YouTube group I'm a part of. We update all of our shit, and just do me a favor and go like that. We're on our way to 100 likes, so you'd be doing me a real solid if you went ahead and liked that page. What else? Oh, be sure to check out my the Sons of Sarazawa shows that I do on my channel and my friends do on theirs, with the Sons of Sarazawa podcast, the Demons From Outer Space podcast, and Shoe Watch Super Dynamic for Ultra Force Go. You can find those on my channel and Kaiju Noir's channel, respectively. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna do for whoring myself out. Again, thanks a lot for watching. I am Zazubaar, and Hulk is out.